I hope you had a wonderful Passover. I hope you ate a lot of matzah. A lot of matzah. That's good. Well, we're back for our spring semester. We're focusing on the book of Deuteronomy, on the theme of the chosen people. Today's class, we have two sponsors today, Jeff and Lori Goldshin and Aliza George, both sponsoring. Today is a very special day. It's the Independence Day of the modern state of Israel, celebrating its 75th anniversary. Of course, the original independence of Israel is what we're studying about as Moses is on the border of the Jordan River about to enter into Israel. Unfortunately, due to exile, we were thrown from the land and we have returned. And we're back in Eretz Yisrael, as we've been speaking about on the days before, the weeks before the break. The beauty of Eretz Yisrael, the strength of Eretz Yisrael, the progress of Eretz Yisrael, and the miracle of Eretz Yisrael that it is. And each and every single one of us, not just today, but every single day, need to thank God Almighty for the miracle of Eretz Yisrael in our lives. Pray for Eretz Yisrael, and especially as you see the Hebrew school in Hebrew High is going to be saluting the Israeli soldiers that have given their lives, Al Kiddush Hashem, protecting the land. All of the brave soldiers of Tzahal should be in our daily prayers every single day, that God watch over them, God protect them, God grant them success in all of their places, wherever it is that they are, protecting our holy people. Also, we ask for a prayer for God's protection of Eretz Yisrael itself, for the people of Eretz Yisrael. We keep hearing of this attack here and an attack here, and siblings losing their lives in an attack. And these are brothers and sisters of ours, and their family are in mourning, and there should be an end to all terrorism, an end to all evil, and an end to all hate. In chapter 12, you don't need the text in front of you. I didn't tell Jacob to put it down there because it's going to be primarily these three verses that I'm going to be focusing in on, and I'll just read the verses to you. It's chapter 12, it's verse 5, 6, and 7. But only to the place which the Lord your God shall choose from all your tribes to set his name. There you shall inquire after his dwelling and come there. And there you shall bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, and the separation by your hand, and your vows and your donations, and the firstborn of your cattle and of your sheep. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice in all your endeavors, you and your households, as the Lord your God has blessed you. So there is, in Moses' words here, there's two things going on. There is a yes and there is a no being said. The yes, there will be a holy temple. There will be a site in this land that you are about to enter that God will select. And it is on that site, and only on that site, that you will bring everything that we spoke about in the entire book of Leviticus and throughout the Torah. There are offerings that are instructed that we're supposed to bring. There is different tithing that was supposed to be brought. Where is that to take place? At this holy temple, at the site that God will designate when you enter the land. Now, they have had in the wilderness a miniature of that. There was a tabernacle. It stayed with them in the wilderness for 40 years. That was allowed, which means they were allowed to bring offerings in the tabernacle in the wilderness. That tabernacle will also continue when they enter into the Holy Land, because Jerusalem and the Temple Mount will not be secured and in Jewish hands until later. We have way later, until King David secures the Temple Mount and until King Solomon builds the Holy Temple on the Temple Mount. During that interim time, there will be a tabernacle. At first it was set up in the city Shiloh, and then it moved from Shiloh, but it was there for a lengthy period of time in the hundreds of years. Designated places that God says, yes, this is the designated place, you are allowed to bring offerings. When there was no tabernacle and there was no holy temple, you were allowed to bring offerings in your locale. But once there was either a tabernacle or a holy temple, the verse is saying that you were not allowed to bring an offering anywhere else. So during the period of time of A, the tabernacles, B, the first holy temple, C, the second holy temple, It was against Jewish law to bring an animal offering any other place but one, the Holy Temple. So Moses is instructing them, that's the place and that's the only place. So let me refresh your memory of the beginning of the chapter. Moses warns them in the beginning of chapter 12 not to allow places of worship to remain. Keep in mind, they're on the border. They're about to enter the promised land. What's going to take place between right now and then? Moses' final farewell. Moses is giving his final speech and he will say farewell to them. Joshua, his student, will take over as the leader. He will march on over the Jordan River into Jericho, which will be the first conquest of the Holy Land. Says Moses to them, I'm instructing you as to what's to happen. There will be discussion of, of the division of land, how the land will be divided amongst the tribes, how the land will be settled. There'll be discussions about the Golan Heights. We're going to have that discussion because the Golan Heights was not at first part of the land of Canaan proper. It gets annexed early on. What's the governing rules as far as what was then called by a different name? We call it the Golan Heights. We'll get to that. But right now he's saying is that the places of worship in the land of Canaan need to be destroyed. You can't keep it. The places of worship that we're referring to are places of human sacrifice, of terrible tragedies and atrocities that would take place at these places of worship. God does not want any of them remaining in the Holy Land of Israel. You'll find the place that God will designate. We know it as Jerusalem. We know within Jerusalem it's the Temple Mount. And there, in either the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash, that will be the only location that you will bring your offerings. In the temple and in the tabernacle, there was something called the Mizbeach. In English, the altar. Okay? And it was on this altar that all of these offerings were brought. We just finished the holiday of Passover, right? The holiday of Passover had an offering. It was called the Paschal Lamb. In the days of the Holy Temple, we would have all been instructed to visit the Holy Temple and to bring a lamb as an offering to celebrate Passover. Why the lamb? Well, you'll have to go back to the very first Passover while they were still in Egypt. Their instruction then to bring a lamb. The lamb was worshipped by the Egyptians as an idol. We were to bring it as an offering to God. We were to take the blood of the lamb. We were to put it on the doorposts of our houses, and God would pass over. Thus, we have the name Passover, the houses that showed that they were participating in the Paschal Lamb. Then he tells us, God, that celebration of the Paschal Lamb is something that should continue. We're not going to put blood on our doorposts anymore, but we're going to sit with our family, we're going to eat roasted lamb. In the days of the Holy Temple, we were all to bring an offering. It was to be brought, part of it was to be put on the altar, and part we would enjoy ourselves with our family, part would be given to a Kohen. Various different offerings. No offering in all the texts of the Bible was ever brought to a human being. We did not bring as a gift an animal offering as a gift to a human being. We didn't bring it to a head of state. We were not allowed to bring an offering to a king. We were allowed to bring gifts to a king, and we often did. But we did not bring an animal offering, as was the case with other nations. When they would bring gifts to their kings, they would bring animal offerings as well. We were forbidden from doing that because animal offerings is a mode of worship. We don't worship kings. We can serve the king, we can respect the king, we can pay taxes to the king, but the king is not God. That's what Pharaoh established himself as a god. Nimrod as a god. Kings established themselves as gods. Yes?
When you go to Versailles, it says the sun god. The Japanese soldiers died, like on Iwo Jima, because Hirohito is the son of the god. Mm-hmm. So even in our time, that concept is still there.
Right. So early on, we're being warned about this, about be careful, never transfer God's status to a human being. There's human beings, they can be holy, they can be angel-like, all of that may be true, but they're a human being. There's a God. They're not the same. Infinite, finite. We have to always remember that. And therefore, in the discussion of animal offerings, it's very clear. Only to God, and what I started with, only in one place. The designated place. Now, on that discussion of the altar, we have to go back to the book of Exodus in its discussion about the building of the altar. Because it's very important, the wording there is very important to our discussion today as to have a better understanding of what's these animal offerings all about. It says there, Mizbach Adama, an altar of earth you shall make. And it keeps using that word, an altar of earth, which means if you ever saw a picture of the altar, it had either gold, one of the altars, or copper, another of the altar. That's just the outside frame. What's inside? It's not solid. All earth. And the earth was connected to the earth. It was an altar of earth, and it's constantly stressed that the focus of the altar is to raise our earthly nature. It's about earth. It's about raising ourselves up. It's not, and we're going to talk about this a lot today, it's not about appeasing God. It's not that God is hungry for meat and okay, we got to calm God down because he wants a steak and let's give him some meat. Or as in other cultures, God is thirsty for blood, so let's give him some blood. Rather, it's about us coming closer to God. Earth, it's about earth raising itself up to godliness. The verse says, when you will worship me, you will bring an offering on the altar of earth. And that offering could have been an animal. It doesn't say, bring me an offering of your gold. Bring me an offering of your silver. It talks about donating gold and silver to build the temple. It talks about donation of dollars, of charity, to help poor people. But when we're talking about giving an offering to God, the Torah talks primarily about an animal, it will talk about a bird, and it will talk about flour. The flour that you make bread with. That's what it will talk about. We did not come to the temple and bring an offering of gold as a gift to God. Why not? It would be ludicrous if you think about it. I'm going to give God some gold. He created the gold. And let's suppose he still likes it even though he created it. What's he going to do with it? Where's he going to invest it? Right? Does he have a safe that he's going to put it in? And when he decides to cash it in, what exactly is he buying up there with it? The idea of giving a gift to God of quote-unquote value makes no sense. He's God. And if he really likes gold, he can just create more of it. God could create a million pounds of gold right now and cause the price of gold to drop considerably. He can play with gold all he wants. He has all the gold he wants. He's the one that made gold valuable. Think about it. When he's creating the world, he's deciding which minerals he's going to create a small amount of that will have great value to people. He's really controlling the price of gold, the price of diamonds, by how much he creates and where he allows humans to discover it, to find it. So the fact that we only find diamonds a few at a time, so to say, keeps the value of diamonds high. But if somehow there was to be this discovery of caves and it's diamonds all over the place, the price of diamonds would drop. So God is in constant control of the value of these things. Therefore, we can't give him a gift of it. You can give your spouse a gift of gold, a gift of diamonds. That you can do. So what does God ask for? He asks for an offering of an animal. There's also no offering of children in the Bible. But there is a verse that tells you don't. Why does the verse have to tell you don't? Because society did that. Idol worshiping did that. It was the ways of the pagans to do that. The people that's being spoken to are aware of pagan life. They've lived near it, they've seen it. And as we said, we have the entire story of Abraham and the binding of Isaac to bring home this point. No human sacrifice in our faith, in our religion. So this whole subject of offerings is a very sensitive subject. Yeah.
The primitive man wanted to give to the deity the best that he had.
Right.
And the best that he had could be his perfect cow or his first child. So the giving means, how am I giving to my deity the most honor, the most great part?
We're going to come back to that when we speak and be very soon about Cain and Abel. Yeah.
So what am I supposed to be giving now?
It's what we're going to talk about. It's today's class and next week's class and perhaps the third week's class. So it's a 3-week package. Okay. The focus was always to be on the relationship, not the value of the gift. And therefore, in the tabernacle, at the temple, yes, we built it out of gold, we built it out of silver, we made it beautiful. But when you're talking about us, the individual, the human being, and in our case, the Jew, bringing an offering to God, that's about your relationship with God. That has nothing to do with the gold and the silver and the diamonds and all the beautiful material used in the tabernacle. The focus was on the relationship. And for that, an altar of earth. Earth, sand. That's all I ask. Because I want you. I want your heart. I want your soul. So if you can't afford a sheep, it's okay. You could bring a little bird that was kosher. You can't afford a little turtle dove, that's okay. You could bring some flour and some oil. Because it's you I want. You. Not the gold, not the silver, it's you. So if you're going to build a sanctuary, you're going to build a holy temple, you're going to build a tabernacle, or in our case, you're going to build a synagogue for your worship of God, it should be nice. Make it nice. Why? It's proper, it's fitting, it's respectful. It wouldn't be respectful if you build for yourself a palace for yourself to live, and the place where you choose to pray to God, you're going to build without any of the beauty of it. That's just out of respect. It's not about worship. You can pray to God anywhere. It doesn't have to be a cathedral. But if the community is getting together and say, let's build a synagogue, of course you're going to say, let's build something nice. You're going to build a holy temple, let's build it nice. But don't mistake the gold used to build the holy temple with God needs our gold. That's a mistake that we often make. There were synagogues as we were on the run throughout a good part of our history. And they were simply an earthen room with earth and with 4 walls. And we made it holy because we made it holy. Yeah.
About the earthen floors, is that why some synagogues today have a dirt floor?
In the Middle Ages, yes.
It depends on the culture and where it was. There's certain cultures that worshipped earth, and therefore you wouldn't want to have earth as the floor because people worshipped it and they would mistake it as part of worship. But many places, it depends on the community itself, their affordability, what they can afford, what they could make. I imagine if you went to synagogues in Persia, you would find beautiful rugs on the floor. Why? Because the culture there was, how did you beautify your home with the beauty of the rugs? And so you would find the most elaborate, beautiful rugs. Different cultures found a way to build a house of worship with what was considered beauty in their locale. Give you an example. Carpeting was at some point considered a luxury. Synagogues had carpeting. Carpeting is out today in most people's homes, right? Well, carpeting is out in most synagogues today as well. It's what was considered the beauty of that particular time. But there is no ingredients other than you need the people, a prayer book, and a Torah to make a synagogue. That's it. You think about this. There were minyanim services held in Auschwitz. I don't think they built a beautiful sanctuary there, but I think their prayers were loftier than the prayers said in the most beautiful sanctuaries ever built. Because again, the focus is your offering. How are you connecting to God? And I think most of your questions are going to be addressed. So let me talk for a while, and I'll take all your questions after I finish speaking. So the beauty of a sanctuary is about expressing our love. It's about expressing our excitement. It's our expressing, hey, we can, so we should. We can afford something nice, let's build something nice. But it's not about that's the only way we can pray. Like with prayer, we don't pray because it will make God's day if we do. Okay? Imagine, God doesn't wake up in the morning and say, you know, I'm feeling so unappreciated today.
Right.
I just don't feel recognized. Oh, look, Moshe Bryski woke up and he's reading some prayers of thanks to me. That made my day. It doesn't work that way. We're not really contributing to the psyche of God or changing necessarily God. Who's being changed by our prayers? We are the one that's experiencing the change. God wants us to pray because he wants us to focus on our needs, on our appreciation of God, on our relationship with God. We're the ones that are coming out different. So it's the focus is on us. God does not need us saying, you're so great, God. Thank you for recognizing that. He's infinite. His greatness is not going to change by us recognizing it or not. We're going to change by it. God is infinite. God is our creator. He doesn't need our gold. He doesn't need our jewels. He doesn't even need our prayers, and he doesn't need our thanks. He wants our deeds. He wants our action. He wants us to connect to him. And he wants us, the human being, to do this by free choice. By the gift that he gave us uniquely as a human being. Use that free choice. You're going to have a lot of things out there in society that's going to try to convince you go this way or go that way. You'll have pagan worship going on there, idol worship going on there, atheism going on there. Use your free choice and decide if you're going to reach out to God in prayer. That's a deed. That's connection. He wants to see our free choice to do deeds of goodness, of helping others, of holiness. He wants us to overcome our own, and I'm going to use this word and we're going to come back to it, our own animal inclination. Because there's an animal inclination in each and every single one of us. And he wants us to channel that animal inclination to make a choice, to understand that there's a God, a creator, who has a very specific way of life that he wants of us. He wants that animal soul in sync with our godly soul. That's our challenge. So, if we were to find ourselves unable to worship and pray in a synagogue that was beautiful, because we were a poor community, we were a discriminated community, the law didn't allow us to build a synagogue, or we were hiding in cellars, our prayers would extend to the heavenly gates wherever it is that we called out to God. It wasn't dependent on a particular ingredient as to how a synagogue must be. If it had stained glass windows, if it didn't have stained glass windows. The very first introduction of temple worship, even before all of the details of the offerings that were to be brought, the Torah will use the word Mizbach Adama, altar of God, altar of earth. Your task is elevating earth. Strive to become more heavenly. And that's what God wants to see in us. Our human, physical means to reach out to him. Notice in the synagogue, no images of God. No drawings of God. No statues of God. We don't do that in synagogue life. In other religions, I don't know about Islam, I don't think in Islam either, but in Christianity there are symbols. In Judaism, no symbols. The ark is just a house of the Torah. That's all it is. We're not praying to the ark, we're not praying to the Torah. We're going to read the Torah during services, and if we're going to have a Torah in our synagogue, let's put it in a respectful place. But don't mistake it that we're praying to an ark. We pray to no symbols, no images, only to God. Earthly, connecting to the heavenly. The altar of the tabernacle was this hollow box filled with earth and attached to earth, because the connection was always about earth. The actual slaughtering of the animal was not done on the altar. It was done nearby. But it was put upon the altar, parts of it, as an offering to God. They sprinkled part of its blood on the altar. And there was an entire service that came along with each offering. The focus of the offering was not about death. It was about life. It was about elevation of life and the sanctification of life. Now, let's take on the sensitive subject, this idea of animal offerings. So the idea of sacrifices and the idea of animal offerings is something that had been part of the culture of the world pre-Sinai. Sinai did not introduce the idea of an animal offering. You find early on in the stories of the Bible, you have a story of Cain and Abel. This goes back to Jack's comments before about people trying to give of their best to God. So here you had two brothers. This is from first generation, which means there's Adam and Eve, and they give birth to Cain and Abel. Later they'll have a third child, but at first it's just these two. There's only 4 people on the face of the earth right now. Cain and Abel are 2 brothers. They want to reach out to God. Abel puts himself completely into it. And it says he offers of the best of his animals. He looks for the best and he brings the best. All he's trying to do is to connect. Cain didn't want to waste. Cain was more of a farmer than a shepherd. So he grew vegetables. He didn't want to give the best ones because he wanted it for his salad on his own table that night. So he found the spoiled ones that he wasn't going to eat anyway, and he brought those as an offering to God. And if you remember the story, God accepts Abel's offering, he doesn't accept Cain's offering. Again, he doesn't need the beautiful looking tomatoes. What was missing from Cain's offering was the heart. It would make no difference about the tomatoes or the cucumbers. God wasn't hungry. What God wanted is to teach him how you connect. And Cain, you didn't put yourself into it. Well, that story will unfold in a very negative way. Cain will get jealous of Abel. Cain will end up killing Abel. We don't want to go back there because then we're going to rewind the clock to the book of Genesis, and it will take us another 40 years to get where we are right now. I don't want to do that to you. So we find the story of offerings early on. Noah, after the flood, brings offerings to God. Part of the story of Noah is the bringing of offerings when he gets off the ark. Abraham in his life pre-Sinai brought offerings to God. Isaac brought offerings to God. He almost was an offering to God, but he brought offerings to God. Jacob brought offerings to God. This is book of Genesis material. This is before there is a Sinai, before there is a tabernacle. So the idea of offerings to God, as once there is human being, there's always been this attempt by the human being to channel some type of way of connecting to God. Some got it right, and some got it wrong. The pagans wanted to bring their best and their what would be best in our firstborn. So they slaughtered their firstborn child to God, to whatever God they worshipped. So we find references in the Torah of idol worshippers bringing offerings to God. But those offerings, as I said, was not limited to animal. As we had it, humans were part of that sacrifice to God as well. The Jewish discussion of sacrifices and offerings is not a secret. It's not a hidden code just amongst the priests. It's part of the Bible. It's written out in very clear detail. It's discussed in even further detail in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, in the Talmud. It's all there. It's very public. We study them. You ever attend a Brit Milah circumcision? Okay, imagine everyone here has attended a Brit Milah in their lives. And I guarantee you it wasn't done in the evening. It was a daytime circumcision. It's against Jewish law to have a circumcision in the evening. That's why it's always in the day. And we wait. At times, if once we see it's getting dark, we can't do it anymore. We've got to wait till the next day. Now why? It's nothing to do with health of the child. It doesn't make a difference to the child day or night. Why? It's never done at night because we never want to give the impression that we're hiding this. That it's a secret cultish thing that we're doing. That this ritual is a secret. See, cults practice in the hiding, in the desert. They don't want to publicize what it is that they're doing. Judaism hides nothing. Let it be known. On this day we're having a Brit Milah circumcision. Why? Because God asked us to. The animal sacrifices of biblical times and temple times were not hidden services and rituals. They were done during broad daylight for all to see. They were public events. Do you know that in the days of King Solomon, people came, and I'm talking about non-Jewish people, came from all over the world as tourists to the Holy Temple to observe and to watch? It became the greatest tourist attraction that there was. Everyone wanted to see and experience the Holy Temple. It wasn't secret services, it was open. Other ancient cultures surrounded their sacrifices with different orgies and prostitution and sexual activities, and Judaism kept it focused, pure, and holy. The focus was connecting to God. And those of other cultures and other nations that had that spiritual feel towards them understood it, knew it, and wanted to witness it. Also, I want you to keep in mind that most of the food of these offerings were eaten. Not all, some were put onto the altar and burnt, but most of it was eaten. It supported the Kohanim, the priests. The Kohanim did not get a piece of land in Israel to farm. Okay, the tribe of Levi were not given particular parcels of land as the rest of the people. How did we survive then? We didn't have fruit trees and orange orchards and lemon orchards. We didn't have a business to make. We were supported, because I'm a Kohen, by the gifts of the people. We serviced the people and they gave us gifts. Part of the gifts that we received was a part of the offering that you brought. So what's for dinner, Dad? Well, I'm on duty today. This guy's bringing a lamb as an offering. We're having lamb chops tonight. Tonight we're getting some brisket. We got a piece of the offerings, a part of the offerings that were brought. The Levites got a part. The family that brought the offerings, they would bring home the food. They would all make a trip to Jerusalem. They would have the food there. Yes, there were parts on the altar. Is that... That's okay. Most of the meat was eaten. There was far less food wasted in the Holy Temple than in any restaurant or household kitchen today. So before we address the biblical concept of animal sacrifices, which we'll talk about next week, what's the idea of the sacrifice? Why did God instruct it from us? We'll have a greater understanding next week, but today, I want to get to this. You should not feel defensive in any way when it comes to the subject that the Torah authorized us to bring animal offerings. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. There's no need to say, that was just in ancient times, but we don't do that anymore. Now, we don't do that anymore, but that's for a different reason. We actually say in our prayers, and we say it every day in our prayers, that we should merit to have in our lifetime the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, and we should merit to bring animal offerings again. It's in our prayers. We say it every day. So none of you are really thinking, I can't wait to bring an animal as an offering. I know that, because I'm with you, right? We don't have Beit HaMikdash, but do you really have within you the desire? Is it there? I can't wait for Mashiach to come, because then I can bring an animal offering. But yet we say that in our prayers. We should merit the day that we can bring an animal offering. So what's wrong here? What's wrong is that we're missing information. And because of that, we end up feeling of, hey, it's a lot better with the prayer book. The prayer book is a lot cleaner. It's a lot neater. The reason we don't bring animals today is because we don't have a holy temple. As I started with, Moses says you can only bring it here. You can't bring it anywhere else. That's why we don't have it. But for those that are disturbed a little by the ancient archaic ritual, what I want to present to you is another ritual that you seem to be more comfortable with. Okay? There is, wait for me. There is a ritual where this yearling calf is slaughtered. They take its blood and it gets recycled as fertilizer. They take its bones and they ground it into gelatin. And then they take its hide and they make these boots that they charge $600 for. Then they take the flesh of this sacrifice and they grill it to medium rare by this man that's wearing this white hat and white apron. Another member of this cult, we'll call him a waiter, brings this piece of freshly slaughtered flesh to your table as there's some piano music playing in the background. Everyone's comfortable with this ritual. You go to restaurants every single day. You have no problem. Why? Because all you're seeing is the steak and fries.
Right.
You stop looking at that steak. That the steak yesterday was some guy in the field moving around. But the hamburger just looks like a hamburger, and the hot dog at Dodger Stadium just looks like a hot dog. So you're fine with this ritual. In fact, billions of people tonight will have dinner. And they probably will have, in some countries, chicken or meat. Or fish, for that matter. And they're totally at peace with it. So why here, when it comes to these chapters, do we suddenly get all uneasy about this animal offerings? Now, you can say because here you're making it a religious practice, and here it's just dinner. But is it just dinner? Or is it a religious practice as well? What if you saw dinner as a religious practice? What if dinner itself was a religious practice? It's not Holy Temple level, but it's a religious practice. Now, you will say, I have a cousin, or perhaps you yourself, or someone out there watching this. That's why I'm a vegetarian. Exactly for that reason. I was uncomfortable with the biblical text about the Holy Temple offerings, and I'm also uncomfortable with the Big Mac. I don't think that any human being has the right to eat meat, chicken, or fish, because it's a living animal. On what right do you have to slaughter this animal because you want to digest it, because it tastes good? There's something wrong with that. And there are vegetarians that are very strong about this, about you have no right. Now, they do have a point there. What right do you have? But I want to go a step further on the question and then come to the answer. Why stop there? Why stop at the animal? What about the tomato? Now, Now, it's a different type of life, but the tomato is alive when it's attached. It's a living, plants are living. They're alive. You may not be able to relate to the tomato like you can to an animal, but really, do you relate to a fish that much too? Now again, there's a different classification of that which grows a vegetable and a living being. But who makes that determination of what living thing you can digest? Why a tomato? Yes. For that matter, let me go a step further. It's your wife's birthday, or it's your 50th anniversary or 10th anniversary, and you go to a florist and you bring home a dozen roses. What right did you have to buy a dozen roses? Some slaughterer decides to go in the fields and murder 12 roses that bothered nobody, wasn't bothering anyone, wasn't interfering, and this fellow, this slaughterer, takes a sword out and murders in broad daylight 12 beautiful long stem roses. Why? Because you want to say mazel tov to your spouse? Buy her a diamond. Leave the roses alone. Everyone's a killer. So now again, I am certain that there are vegetarians that have responses. I'm sure they've heard these questions before, and they've seen the responses and the responses to the responses, and it goes back and forth, and nobody wins. There's one answer, and that is that you're right. We would have no right to the meat, or to the chicken, or to the fish, or to the tomato, or to the roses, unless God, who created it all, gave us that permission. That's it. It's as simple as that. Without that permission, you're 100% right. And so we're going to have to back up, and we'll do this, we're going to have to back up and ask them the question, so why did God give us that right? Why not manna from heaven, period? In the wilderness, they had manna from heaven. Why not let everything live? Now you're going to get a question of the population of the animal life. You'll have a lot of other questions that will come about. But let us suppose God never gave us permission to eat meat. Because that's something he grants in the times of Noah. He grants permission. I now give you permission to consume, to eat meat. He didn't have to. He chose to do so. We're going to have to understand why he gives us that permission. But it could have very well been in a take of God and come to the godly mind to create the human being without consumption of animal life. I mean, if you want to just ask philosophical questions, we can ask him all day. Why does he create a human being that needs to eat in the first place?
Better question.
You know, why just have a human being and we just keep marching on? Why do we need sleep? Just straight on, no food, no sleep. I know you're going to say it's a boring life. I get it. A lot of questions here, but the only answer is that God is the grantor. If you believe that God is the creator of the world and God grants us that permission, now we have that permission. But he limits the permission. It's not carte blanche. It's not your own thing. You can't torture an animal. Judaism has additional rules on consumption of food. It has to be kosher. You can't mix milk and meat. It has to be slaughtered properly. You can't have the blood of it. You can't have the fat of it. All of this is all connected. There is a divine plan. There's a divine thought. But even to the Gentile world, and the permission to eat meat is not to torture animals. Yes?
Very interesting comment about animals. There was a woman who really got her psyche into how cows felt. And the way they were slaughtered, they didn't like to go to the slaughter, even though they didn't see the slaughtering. She then provided a round way for them to come. And of course, being hit instantly, so the death was instant. And once she set that up, the slaughtering of the animals came
I don't think animals like to be put into any type of pain. And as you know that hunting for sport in Judaism is outlawed. We're not allowed to.
Yeah.
Just because you want to have a sport, play baseball.
Right.
It's not the animal's fault that you're bored. So we're not allowed to. Fishing for the sake of food is allowed. But fishing just for the sake of sport and killing fish, you can't. So there's so much sensitivity to the animal, but that it allows us to eat the animal. That, again, I'm going to leave for next week. Now, people would respond to some of what I said and saying, well, there's a difference between the animal and the tomato, and that the animal suffers pain and the tomato doesn't feel any pain. And I would answer is, how do you know? Have you ever been a tomato? I mean, pain may be a very different pain for the tomato, but it experiences some change when you snip it off its plant. Something is changing. You want to call it pain. Maybe the tomato calls it something else. But the tomato's growth has come to an end because you decided you were hungry. So we're bringing about change. And also, pain can never really be a deciding factor if something is moral or not moral. We have to be very, very careful with that. Because the moment pain becomes the measuring tool, then we can start murdering human beings so long as it's painless. You know, then it's all okay. Oh, they're not having any pain. Okay, we can figure out how to kill them without pain. So we have to be very, very careful. If killing of an animal is wrong, it can't be because of pain, because we can kill it without causing it pain. So we need to have a broader understanding of God, the human being, food, offerings. All of these questions that I have raised gives you something to think about over the next week. And we'll continue this next Wednesday.